So Jeff, we've talked as though kind of traditional and new modes of scholarship are actually something that are completely separate, but in many ways they're not, right? Both as we've already talked about in terms of methodology, but also in terms of publication. We've seen some attempts over the past decade or so to put these kind of hybrid pieces into effect, and I think there are some pretty significant difficulties in doing that. But I think do you think that that's one of the things we're going to see more of in the future?
It seems to me that in some ways it's surprising that it's been over 10 years since Ed Ayers and Will Thomas's article appeared in the American Historical Review, that really most of the article didn't appear in the American Historical Review. It was a few short pages, and then the rest of the article and all of the evidence for the argument that Will and Ed were making were online. The differences slavery made. So there's this amazing. It seemed like this amazing moment in time, and then what has happened, I think, is that there are real difficulties in matching up print edition with an online edition. Some of them are technical, right? But some of them have to do with meshing a journal that and most journals are like this, a journal that expects all of the information to be in the journal itself, and then asking someone to go elsewhere to see the rest of the article. I think that has been a problem in terms of logistically putting those things in practice, and so we haven't seen a lot of things that follow up. But I think what we're going to see in the next 2 to 5 years actually is quite a few of these things. I think almost every journal is wrestling with this idea. Every we would say traditional print journal is looking around and seeing some of those online journals and seeing the opportunities that those journals have to present a richer set of information. And I think we're going to see more and more of these journals look for ways to create these, what we might think of as hybrid articles that are essays that both exist in a print form but have some kind of substantive online component, whether it's something as simple as just access to the primary sources that were used, or access to the databases that were used, or fundamentally integral visualizations that don't reproduce well in 2 dimensions, but that when one interacts with them, one can see the arguments that the authors are making. So I think we're going to see a lot more of those things in the coming years, both because the traditional journals, the print journals, are looking at these online journals, but also I think because as more and more scholars begin to work on these projects and begin to use these tools, they really want their final product to take full advantage of that.
And I think, that reminds me of the Journal of American History series that attempted to use that kind of model to get these articles into the classroom, right, using additional sort of materials online. We've spent most of our time talking about research and scholarship, but as I pointed out in the beginning, you very successfully, I think, taught a lot of undergraduate classes at Mary Washington that had a pretty significant digital history component. In a sense, the beauty of that, it seems to me, and my experience is much less than yours, but the beauty of that is you've actually got students doing history in a way that is a lot harder to do in other sorts of classes. They're right. Actually, we tell them when we teach them that you're historians, but that often doesn't really mean very much in kind of traditional lecture-based classes. But it seems to me that in these sorts of classes, and I've done some oral history stuff, and you've done a lot of digital history-related classes, you've actually got the opportunity to get students in there getting their hands dirty and actually producing stuff. You talked about the James Farmer
right.
lectures. There's actual content that scholars can use and will use and should use that's being produced by undergraduates.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think it's a remarkably powerful thing, I think, to be able to tell students that what they are doing is not just an assignment for me to read. Right? What they are doing is an active contribution to, we should joke, the greater sum of human knowledge, right? But
except it's really not a joke.
It's not a joke because it actually is. So it's this amazing thing that that watching students be motivated to create something, to create a resource for, that makes available, all the letters that James Monroe wrote when he was minister to France back to the government. They understand, the 4 students who worked on that project understood that what they were doing was not an empty exercise, was not a wasted exercise just to develop a set of skills, but was an act of an historian, right? That they were doing real and valuable history, and that they were contributing something to a profession that maybe they don't go on to work in for a career, but it represents something of value. And so I think, I think there are real opportunities. The tools have come to the point where the threshold for entry is so low that it's possible to integrate these things into our classes. And I think in some ways, it's selfish of me to do all these things in my classes, because I see students get excited about these projects and get excited about knowing that others are reading what they've done, and they get comments and they get emails and they get contacted about these projects that they're working on. So to transcend the classroom in that way is an unbelievably powerful thing, and we see more and more faculty, more and more historians are doing this in their classrooms because they see that same value of students creating for a larger public audience.